So today we plan on talking about editing in Camtasia, and again, we're focusing more on Camtasia because that's the free tool provided by Purdue. In our last session, given that we have time to kind of show some more, we can touch on some other applications that are out there and other type of video production software that is available. But since this is one that we primarily work in and some support is provided to us, we're going to focus on editing in that today. Last time we talked about just filming your video for the first time and getting it into Camtasia. Now we're going to talk about what to actually do with those different video clips, how to add transitions, how to kind of add call outs and move your clips around and make edits. So we're going to focus a little bit on that. And again, feel free to put any questions you have throughout in the chat. If we can, we'll touch on it throughout, but we'll get to all of them at the end. And we also have, if you're at our last session, Joan Crow from AdCom was able to join and help out. And she's going to talk at the end about branding. So I'll let her introduce herself at the end before we get into any questions. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Greg Lindberg, the IT specialist for Extension in the director's office. And we have Lily will be kind of running the show today, Lily Morrissey.
Hi, I'm Lily Morrissey. I work with Greg. I'm the database and content specialist based out of West Lafayette. So getting started in Camtasia, I will share my screen. Okay, sorry, just got to move some things around here. So to get started in Camtasia, you're going to want to import possibly a recording that you already have. So to do that, you would click this green button over here. If I can just click it, and then select a recording that you have and you might want to add into your new project. And then it'll pop over into your media bin. I don't remember, or just to kind of recap what we did the first recording, you're going to want to select the record button over at the upper left hand of the screen. And then by doing that, you can select over here if you want to have your screen on, the dimensions that you want to use, if you want your camera to be recording you, how you want to adjust your microphone level, and then you can go ahead and select record as soon as you have everything set up the way that you want it to be. Then it gives you this nice little countdown. So as of right now, it's already recording everything that I'm doing and saying. And then in order to stop recording, I'm going to select the F10 key on my computer. So that's my recording that I just had from my computer screen. And then I can click and drag it down into my timeline. And another thing that you can do if you realize that you forgot a recording that you might have already had, or you go through later and you decide that maybe you want to add something else, you can go ahead and select this plus sign down here, and then it'll bring you right back to something else that you've already done in the past. So every video is good to start out with a introduction. So what I did is I have my introduction already in the library file. And then I just named it intro 1. So you can name it anything that you want. You'll probably come up with quite a few of these throughout all of the videos that you're going to make. You can make them in techsmith.com. So you can go to techsmith.com, and that's how I made this video that I have, my intro. And in order to pop that in, I'm going to make sure that I have my track selected. So both my audio and my video are selected right now. You can tell that they're highlighted. And then I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm just going to drag them back. And that's when I go over to my library and I select my intro, the one that I want to use. And then I just pop that right in. If you drag your video back far enough, you can put it, oh, sorry. I have too many things selected. If you drag your video back far enough, you can pop it into track 1. Otherwise, it'll just kind of adding tracks as you go. I think it's easier if you just kind of try to work with fewer tracks. So I like to just try to put everything on maybe a max of 4 tracks or 3. Okay, and then you can just kind of, once I get my playhead moving, okay, it's not working. Okay, so.
You have to just click outside. Yeah, I think you just have to deselect it and make sure just one.
Okay, yep. I had too many things selected at one time. Thank you, Greg. And so then you can see that my timeline is zoomed in pretty far. So my intro plays for about 6.5 seconds. And then this is my intro, and you can watch it right up here. So that'll play. You can tell that there's no music. All my audio will be on track 2, but there's no music added to it at this time. So if I want to make my intro longer, I can hold down the control button, select both of all of the video that I want to move back, and then I can take my playhead and just move it back. Oh, nope. I can just hold down the shift key and move it back. Okay, and then if you do end up separating both your playhead, you can double click your time marker, and it'll bring it back together to 1. So if you want to make your intro longer, you can just click and then drag that right up against to where you want your the second part of your video to play. So I was able to kind of mess around with how I want my video to look, my intro. And you can do that over in this properties section right over here on the right-hand side of your screen. You can mess around with different colors that you want once you select something, and just kind of play around with different colors. But when you do go to the library for all of your different intros, certain ones you can play around with, and certain ones will not let you play around with them.
Can you show them how to add a new thing to the library? So it also, as we're going to show you later, you might add annotations, you might add some call outs and certain things the way that you like them, and you want to keep that so that you can reuse it for future videos. If you just right click, like if you right click your that clip again, you can always click add to library, and that's how
yep.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's okay.
if you create an intro that you like, after you've played around with the colors and how you want it to look, even if you have your audio already on it, you can just go ahead and right click your intro that you've made and select Control Shift A, or you can just right click and add it to your library. And then whenever you do go in and make a future video, it'll be in your library already for you to use. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place for a second. And then in order to kind of play around and start editing, you can either use any of these tools right over here at the left-hand side of your screen, or you can also, there's a lot of different keyboard shortcuts that you can use. So I have to, okay. So if I decide that I want to make a cut somewhere, perhaps right over here, I can go ahead and I can either select the scissors tool. So I'm going to go ahead and select the scissors tool right where I have my playhead. Oops, I don't have everything, need to have everything selected. And then I can select the scissors. Okay, sorry, I did that incorrectly. I can go ahead and press the undo key right here, or I can go ahead and press Control Z on my keyboard to get that back. But right where my playhead is, I can go ahead and press the scissors tool if I want to kind of get rid of some of that audio. And in order to get it back again, I can just press the undo key. Okay. My computer's being a little bit silly right now. Greg, can you chime in?
Yeah. What are you trying to do now? Just do the.
I'm trying to show the scissors button, but for some reason my computer's not.
Yeah. So if you click on the scissors there, you're just trying to make a cut.
I'm trying to just like in this certain area. So I would want to take the red button right over here, and I can make a highlight just of the area that I want to select, and then press the scissors button, and it's just going to get rid of that area. In doing so, it's also going to get rid of that audio that I had playing over that video part, and that's pretty much what you're always going to want to do, because you don't really want to get rid of audio that is playing over a video, because you're going to end up running into future problems where maybe the video is playing, but my voice is not syncing up with where the video is at. So the scissors button can be really useful in terms of that. In order to make a split.
Real quick, just going along with that, Lily, sometimes you might have an audio track that's music, and in that case, I think you mentioned, maybe we mentioned last time, I can't remember, but you can also lock the track. So if you needed,
Yep.
Let's say that second track was just music playing over, a bunch of different visuals in your clip, and you didn't want to, make a cut to that music as well, but only to the video, then that's when you would click that lock right there, so that when you do make that cut that she just made, it wouldn't cut the music, the track 2 as well.
Yeah. So now the way that I have it highlighted, like Greg said, since my audio is locked, if I go ahead and press the scissors key, it only deleted and cut out my video. It did not cut any of the audio that is playing over the video. And then in order to kind of go back so that next time I want to edit the audio, I can just go ahead and click the lock button again, and that'll unlock it. If I want to make a split right here, so maybe going down and seeing where there's a lapse in where I'm talking right over here, if I want to just kind of cut this out, I can put my playhead right where I want to make the split. Select both tracks if you want to select both tracks, if you also want to cut the audio, or if you're only looking to cut one, just select the audio, and then you can either use this split tool right over at the left hand side, or if you're on a Windows computer, you can press just the S key, and if you're on a Mac, you can press Control+T. So that's going to go ahead and give me that split. And then later on, if I decide that I don't like any of this, I can just go ahead and select the audio that I don't want. And I can either select delete on my keyboard, or I can press the scissors key for cut. And once again, in order to get that back, I can select the undo key, or I can press Control-Z. And then as far as adding an annotation, annotations are extremely helpful when you're trying to specifically kind of make a little bit of a note on your screen, or if you want to kind of call attention to a certain area of your screen. So this is just one kind of annotation. It'll kind of show in a sketch area. There's a bunch of different ones that you can use, and all different styles that you can choose from. So the best rule of thumb is if you choose one style and perhaps one color, you should most likely stick with that color or that style throughout your entire video, so that you don't have, a purple star coming up on your video and then a green cloud, or all different sorts of funky things. Keeping it consistent is key. And so then just moving some things around on my computer. And then in order to add that onto your screen, you can either add it right over here, or you can also put it down into your track 3. And then wherever you put it is where it's going to play in your video. And then you can kind of make that shorter or longer on your timeline if you just go ahead and make sure that you have that selected and then drag it either in or out for it to play longer or shorter. In order for you to adjust the text or adjust the color, if you just head over to the right hand of the screen, make sure that you have your thing selected and then just simply start typing. And then you can go ahead and play with the font or make sure it's highlighted. You can go ahead and play with the font and play with the color, the size of things, the spacing, all of that kind of fun thing right over in your properties section on the right hand of your screen. So I believe that brings us right into transitions.
Sure. Yeah, and just kind of going back with some of the stuff Lily has touched on so far. I know that this session might be a lot if you're new to Camtasia. So something Lily and I have really talked about is what we want to achieve from these sessions is that we wanted to show you that you can go in here and just kind of play around. Even if you have some clips that you're just playing around with, I think that we want you to see that a lot of these tools are drag and drop, really easy to use, but you can do so much playing around in different things. So it can look a little overwhelming as well, but I think once you get in there and start moving some of these pieces around and playing with the properties, you're going to feel more confident about it. So, and like there's so many different shapes and call outs as well. I think another thing that we've talked about is that make sure when you are using call outs, and Joan's going to talk about branding as well later, that you have a consistency throughout your video. And if you're doing like a video series or something like that, that you're not using, wildly different colors and different fonts, that you have kind of a consistency throughout what you're trying to do as well. So if we want to go ahead and go into transitions now, there's a lot of options here, and I feel like transitions, like when we look at visual effects later, there can be things that might bring you back to old Windows Movie Maker day of like a lot of star wipes or bad effects from the 70s and things like that. These effects or these transitions and effects aren't bad, but obviously if you're going to use, as you can see here, barn door, checkered board, you're going to like place those throughout your video. It can look a little silly. It's got to really make sense to the video. The transitions that you're going to use more than anything are going to be the fade and the fade through black. So primarily, like as Lily put that intro and that first clip down there at the bottom, what I always do to transition from an intro to the first clip is I would just if you take that fade transition and you can just drag it in between there, just like she's doing. And then when you play it, it makes it a little easier. It's a lot of fades that we don't even notice when we watch videos that they're happening. You can adjust the length as she's doing right there as to how long that fade is. The fade to black is a really good transition to use at the end of a video, especially if there's a couple seconds after a person's talking, or it just kind of takes you out of the video. And those are just simple transitions that even if you notice there's a part in your video where it's kind of choppy or there seems to be an issue with it, I've had examples where I'm showing an application and I need to switch from one application or me talking to showing something on my computer screen. That's where I'm probably going to use that fade or something so that it doesn't look as choppy as it could without that transition. But again, play around with some of those other ones too. Maybe that like blur one might work if you're like doing something outside. There's a lot of different transitions that will just meet that type of video that you're doing. But again, the fade and fade to black are the two that I think you will come to use more often than any others. And again, you can also, they have their properties as well there on the right hand side too. And then next, I think I was going to touch on audio effects. It looks like it moves around a little bit in the Windows version, but yeah, so audio effects, that's another portion of just when you add a clip, and we've had plenty of people come to us and tell us that they've had, you know, some audio out in the field that is too much background noise and things like that. So there are some options here in these audio effects that allow you to try and play around and remove some of that background noise, some of that extra gain that you're getting, that feedback. So the noise removal, all you basically do is just add that effect to the audio track as she's doing there. And then the properties for that show up on the right-hand side. So that's where you can kind of adjust what I would normally do if I'm having major audio issues and I want to try and clean it up. Not even necessarily major. Let's say there's a lot of wind blowing in the background, or you're hearing some like static. That's when you might want to put that effect on there and then click that analyze button, and it will kind of try to adjust it to where it thinks it should be. So that's always an option. It's not going to do much now because her audio is good there, but it's always something to play around with. When I talk about the audio effects that are within Camtasia, I feel like they're just an added thing in your toolbox in Camtasia. They don't necessarily aren't the cure for all audio issues, but they're definitely worth using. The same with the audio compression. That one works really well. Well is kind of relative, but sometimes when maybe you have somebody on a different microphone, it kind of normalizes some of that audio issues that you have, where you might have one person being too loud, one person being a little more quiet. I feel like the audio compression effect can help there too, especially with some of those big spikes that you might see in your audio sometimes. And just even, I don't think we mentioned before, but even going to that audio track by itself, you can adjust the volume right there in the middle. So if you click that line that she's adjusting, if you have like really low audio, you can bring it up right there, which is really nice. You can just raise the audio. Obviously, you're not going to want it to spike and go all the way to the top, but if you need to bring it up a little bit, that's really a little easy thing you can do right there. The other things is the fade in and the fade out. Those are especially good with music. If you have music playing in your intro and you need it to fade in and out, or else it's going to sound like a big quick jump, and it kind of can be kind of jarring. So those fade in and fade out effects are good. You probably won't want to use that when somebody's talking, because you don't want to miss out on the last things that they're saying. But definitely for music, I feel like you might want to use those fade in and fade outs. And as you can see, you can adjust them as to where it starts and begins and all that. So that's pretty much audio effects. Yeah, I think now we're going to go to behaviors and animations.
Okay. So moving on to some behaviors. So most of these behaviors are good to add when you're kind of playing around with how you're going to make your intro. So you might want your the Purdue extension to kind of fly in a little bit. So you can go ahead and add that to your intro, just so that things go ahead and fly in or fly out. And you can also add them to annotations that you add or callouts that you add. So you can make things kind of pop up or reveal themselves, kind of just slide in, or different things like that. And if you just hover over it, it'll show you kind of what it looks like. And then in order to add that, you would want to just kind of click and bring that right onto your callout on the track that you have it on. And then a good thing to do is, since you have kind of this extra addition of your annotation, and then you also have your behavior added, you can go ahead and click Control-G, and that's going to group all of your things together so that you don't have too many things going on at once. Kind of keeps things a little bit more neat and clean on your timeline. And then going to animations, if you select the More button and then head over to animations, this is where you can kind of play around with how your screen's going to look. So if you select the zoom in and zoom and pan, this one I think is probably really good. If you maybe if you don't want to use a transition, or you're kind of trying to show a specific area on your computer that maybe is kind of harder to read at just the normal 100% zoom, you can kind of zoom in or zoom out. And then in order to get that on there, you would just go ahead and click and drag that onto the area that you want to add it to on your video. And there's a ton of other animations that you can use. So you can go ahead and click scale to fit or smart focus. And a lot of these you probably won't need to use, but some of them can be very fun. So there's just kind of like the different transitions that Greg was talking about. You're probably not going to want to use all of them, being that they won't be all uniform, and you do want to kind of keep a nice and clean looking video. But a lot of these, adjusting the opacity or doing like the smart focus can really be good, especially if you are recording your screen and you're trying to maybe show a specific place that you want them to click. So then you would just go ahead and where this arrow is right here, that's exactly where it's going to put it. So, sorry. So having your playhead over here, wherever your playhead is and wherever you drag it, that is going to be the place that it adds your behavior and your animations. So I think with that, we go on to visual effects.
Okay, and as you can see, when Lily clicks more there on the left-hand side, that there's a lot of other options besides that we're not necessarily going to get into today. The next thing we're going to do is visual effects, but there's also voice narration, these cursor effects, there's captions, and as Joan mentioned last time, there's some captioning resources that AdCom has, and they help with that as well. But that might be something that we touch on if we have time in our last session. But also we're going to touch on our next session using YouTube, their captioning. And actually our next session, we're going to talk about, you can just take your whole video when it's ready and you can save it to your computer, or you can actually push it straight to YouTube as well. So we'll show you how to do that. But right now, if you click visual effects, so again, there's some things on here that you can play around with. You could get it crazy and you could make it not the way you want. It's just like any other type of editor where there's so many different choices and ways to do things. There's this remove a color, so that you can see this guy here is in a green screen and they just made it, hit a green background and they made it just black. Those kinds of effects can be very useful. Then there's also the interactive hotspot is another one that we've had people ask about and that we've used quite a few times. So when you move that to a clip, usually at the end you want them to click to a site or a survey. You can add that to the video. Maybe Joan can touch too. I don't know off the top of my head how well that works when it goes to YouTube, because I know YouTube has some features that allow you to do that too. But if you're just sharing a video with somebody, yeah, I think it works out fairly well. I think it's kind of dependent on where they're viewing it, but I've seen some success with the interactive hotspots. It can be tricky at times in my experience, but that will let you click to a link that you want them to go to within the video. And then there's also glow, drop shadow. Those kind of just add a little bit of glitz to your video. If you feel like you're getting confident enough and you want to kind of spruce it up a little bit, you can always play with these things. I can see if you go up a little bit, there's some other things you can do with color adjustment and the color tint that could be effective if you're out and there's a lot of sunlight, things like that. So definitely those out in the field videos, I can see potentially playing around with these visual effects. But as you can see, there's the properties on the side that you'll play with when you add them that will really allow you to make those adjustments that may or may not work, but they're definitely worth exploring if you need to. And then there's also clip speed, which I won't get. You can do that with audio too. There's been some times where we need to make a clip shorter or we need to make it longer. That can be a little tricky playing around with that, but if you have something that was really fast and you need to slow it down, that can be a little tricky with audio too, but that is another visual effect that you can do there as well. So with that, I think that's pretty much what we wanted to cover in Camtasia today, and we're going to go through questions after Joan speaks, but I'm going to go ahead and let Joan talk about branding now.
Well, thanks. There are a couple of things that were popping into my head as we were watching some of those demos, and this is really good because this is not, editing is not something that we actually sit down and teach people about. So this is, I think this is a good session. I will say about any kind of effects, with great power comes great responsibility. And I would use those judiciously, simply because good storytelling often is a cut. And I think Greg was right on by saying fades, dissolves, dipping to black, whatever, those are going to be your most common transition pieces, you know, because it's really about the story that you're trying to tell. And so use those judiciously. They're kind of fun, but, you know, make sure that they're adding to the story and not detracting from your message. So I was going to share some slides, but I think I'm actually going to share website instead. I want to go over some ideas that, well, as you're all probably aware, the university switched branding earlier this year, and it was just this year, if you can imagine. Feels like we've lived a lifetime since the whole rollout of the new brand. And we're still working through getting everything changed over in our area, but there are a lot of tools that are available that you may not be aware of. And so I want to go over, I'm going to share this website. Let me see if I can find where I am. Here we are. So I want to share with you the university's brand website. And do you see that? Did I just take that away? It's at brand.purdue.edu. And that's got so much information. This site has so much information on it that I think you should all bookmark this site. There are things in here that you'll want to pay attention to. All the colors, all the Purdue colors that are acceptable within brand are listed on this page, and it gives you what the color numbers are, so that if you're editing within Camtasia, there are probably places that you can either put an RGB number in or a hex code or something like that, those options in, and it's got all the approved branded colors, so you can use any of these. I know they're not super colorful, but you'll be within brand. And another thing that's on this page is the font families that are acceptable. Some of these may already be embedded into Camtasia. I'm not really sure what fonts are available, but these are the approved brand fonts. And so using these, you're not going to go wrong. There's United Sans, Acumen Pro, those are the basics. And you can, I think within Adobe, you have I don't know what everybody has, but you can, some of these are embedded within the Adobe package that Purdue pays for. I won't go into that. On video, there is a video link under visual as well that gives you some information about the brand language, be visually interesting, having clear, understandable audio. These are just some basic things that they want you to bear in mind, because the whole point of this whole rebranding that Purdue did was what the goal is, that if you look at any communication material that comes out of the university, you say, oh, that's Purdue. And anybody would say that. They would recognize that that's part of Purdue. And so that was our goal, because everybody prior to this was still kind of doing their own thing. We had a million colors that we could choose from. And they really want this to look like Purdue material. There is also, here is the brand, the university brand, but we'll get more specific about Extension and the College of Ag brand and 4-H as well. So there are things here that you can download. There are rules and regulations about how to use the logo, that kind of thing. But in tools and downloads, this may be even more, what was it? Yeah, here it is. Under downloads, you can go in here and there are files that are available to you to download and use within here. So if you go under video, if they have lower thirds that are available, and what lower thirds are, in case you don't know the lingo, it's the naming key. So that if you want to put somebody's name on the screen, those are called lower thirds. They also have some logo animated. Now, some of this is just the university version. So it just says Purdue University. So you can see that there are several things that you can download and use within your videos. And it's quite handy to have the university supplying some of that. Now, the other thing is we've done it one better. And last week I talked a little bit about this, this particular site that we created when we did the do-it-yourself video webinar. And so this is at purdue.ag/video tips. And in this Dropbox folder, we've included information on captioning. We have the webinar that we provided. We have the slides from our webinar that if you're interested in watching any of that, you can. There's a photo release you can use if you're videotaping people. There's a resources link document right there that has information in there about music that's available that you can use and some other assets. There's a tips for capturing video that's like a best practices. And then within this video outros, this would be videos that you can use at the end of your, or clips that you can use at the end of your video that you can bring in as an asset. And we have 3 different branded pieces here. We have Extension 4-H, we have the College of Agriculture, and we have Extension. I know that when we were doing the presentation, the 4-H folks were like, please make sure that anything that's created that's a 4-H project, that they use the 4-H mark as well. So you have those options there. They also have the EEO statement on them so that you're covered there as well. So please use these. We created them so that people would download those and find good use for them. So let me see. I don't know if there was anything else that I needed to say. I'm gonna check real quick. Yep. But that, like I said, the brand website I think would be particularly useful if you're not familiar with working with a new brand. All the colors, fonts, it's all there. So yeah, I think somebody did, Greg Lindberg put the links in there. Thanks, Greg. What is the best way to put a name banner on the individual's face? I have used. I'm not really, I know you just explained the annotated feature, but I'm more familiar with putting the lower thirds on. Is that, would you call that an annotated piece?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I don't know. It's kind of different than the annotation, I guess, too. Those are more just, I think of the annotations as call outs, like I'm wanting to show, click here, that's primarily what I've used annotations for, yeah.
So lower thirds usually are something that you overlay. It's another layer of your timeline, very similar to where you saw her dragging in video clips and stacking them on top of each other. That will go over that. And usually we ask the person, what do you want? spell your name. When we videotape, we go out and say your name and spell it, because when we get back to the office, we don't want to, if we always sickeningly say, if one of us gets hit by a bus, then everybody knows who this person is on the camera, on the tape, and we know how to spell it, and then they give us their title as well. So so we include the name and title on those lower thirds. Typically, you'll see most videos come from us have name and title on there.
I always describe lower thirds to people as whenever you see somebody speaking on news, when you see any new person, and it'll show what their name and job title is. But also I have seen a lot of, like, I don't know, it's probably more preference, but I've seen some documentaries or videos where they have I think if you show them once, you don't really need to show it again. So you don't need to, if that same person's going to talk 2 minutes later, you don't necessarily need to put that lower title in. Yeah.
That's true, unless it's in a really long documentary and you need to be reminded. But yeah, for the most part, you let them talk for a second or two, then you pull up, then their name comes up with them, and with that, and then it fades out as they continue to talk. And the rule of thumb is, for graphics, oftentimes is read it out loud twice. Well, that's as long as you need to leave that up on the screen. Is if you can read it out loud twice, that's long enough for somebody to read it. And there is a lot of lingo, and it's hard for me to avoid, because it's just part of my vocabulary, and so I apologize for that in the past. Yeah, but naming yourself, yeah. So that's what a lower third would be. But yeah, like I said, there are a lot of resources out there that are available, and use them. I mean, I think most of us want to be in brand. We want to, be playing well with the university, and so use the tools that they've created. That would be my recommendation. Are there any more questions about that? Let me look through. Yeah.
If you don't have anything else, we can just open it up to questions, and if people think of anything related to that, we can just answer it along the way. I think there was a couple that before you spoke that we didn't get to, and thank you for going through that. I believe Paul Jones said, in my version of Camtasia, I have the audio effect called volume leveling. Is this the same as audio compression? I'm not sure. I guess I would think that that's kind of, like I said, normalizing the audio. So kind of getting all the levels down to the same thing. But again, I agree with Joan. A little bit can go a long way, even with audio effects and visual effects, because it's letting you just do a little bit in Camtasia as far as audio goes, because you could even take the audio track and do things in Audacity, which is a free audio app that a lot of us use. But it takes a lot of practice just with editing videos to understand what those different features are. Talk about lingo when you get into audio editing. That's a whole other beast to actually editing your video. So I think that playing around with it and trying to see if it's something you can adjust, it's not going to hurt, because you can always get rid of that effect after you drop it in if it's not working for you. So if you want to try that volume leveling to fix whatever issue you have, feel free to do that.
Oddly enough, I would say that in video production, audio is probably one of the is far overlooked, because if your audio is not good, people will tune you out. And if you think about even in video conferencing, if somebody's having some connectivity issues and their audio cuts out, you may still see them on the screen, but if you can't understand what they're saying, I mean, you've really lost them. And so, paying attention to things like wind noise, and because the wind can wreck you if you're outside taping, and it's loud and it's rumbly, and I'm going to tell you from experience, it's very difficult to remove from an audio track without making it sound horrible, and worse probably. So, audio is an overlooked component. Oftentimes people look at the screen and say it looks nice. But if you can't understand somebody, then you've lost them.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a question before, Paul, that Amanda had is there a way to add a blank time? Or, for example, when switching topics and you want a brief pause, maybe if there's a way to do that in Camtasia. I think that goes back to what we were talking last time, that it is very helpful to have some of those pauses in there where it's easier to edit out rather than add things in. So, you definitely want to plan out your video and have pauses as much as possible when you're recording, actually, because it's going to be harder to, if you're thinking about whatever is going on in the background and you want to pause, because you might be, if you just are showing a slide and you want a little more time, it's going to be easy to expand that slide, for a couple seconds. But if you're out in the field and doing other stuff, that's going to be a lot more challenging. So, things to think about.
We have a collective knowledge it's a language of film that we have learned, and we have not even known we have learned. If you've watched movies at all, if you've watched television at all, there is a certain language that you learn visually, and one of the things is a dip to black or a fade, dissolve from one shot to another, tells you that time has passed, and is also a good indicator of topics switch. So that if I'm switching to a new topic, I may just want to dip to black and come right back up, and then that's visually communicated to your audience that you're changing topics. The dissolve is much more about time passage. I'm trying to compress time. So if I'm showing step by step how to do something, maybe here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. Well, if I don't really want to show that all in real time, I may compress that and put a dissolve in between each of those steps to say, and then time changed and we've moved ahead in the process. And so I don't want to overwhelm you with things like that, but I think those two pieces may be the most important visual cues that you'll be giving people, is with that dip to black and with a dissolve or crossfade. What's it called in Camtasia?
Just fade to fade. I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a fade, and then there's also a fade to black.
Okay. So those two tools, I would imagine, would be your most common editing tools, transitions.
Mm-hmm. Did you see this question, Joan, from Crystal on here? I don't know. I don't think we touched that one yet.
So if we are making a video as part of a group with external partners, what are the expectations? Well, if Purdue Extension has something to do with it, you definitely need to have the EEO statement on there. I would also recommend the logo, but it's okay to put somebody else's logo if you're doing it in conjunction with them. And in that case, you may not use the animated piece. You may just get the graphics. You may ask them for their graphic, and you'll download the Purdue Extension, just the plain still graphic, and put those together on an in-screen together, perhaps. But you'll still want the EEO statement on there.
The other question from Brian Overstreet is if I do some sound leveling in Camtasia before I send it to someone to do more editing in their Apple product. So I guess you're saying, I think as I understand it, is making an audio edit in Camtasia and then editing it in another application, maybe. If you're doing that, I mean, if you're moving editing in one application to another, I think it can get muddled sometimes. It's not that you can't do that, but that becomes tricky as well. So, I mean, I would recommend staying in one thing as much as possible that you can. Are there any other questions that we have? Just about, it doesn't necessarily have to be about what we talked today, but just in Camtasia or video production in general, since we have Joan here too. She's got quite a bit of insight. Well, if we don't, here's another question that always happens. Having issues with videos being blurry after editing. Looks good on my iPhone, and upload into Camtasia looks good, then upload into YouTube and blurry. So that's another thing maybe we can talk about quality in our last session as well too, because there are a lot of different options when it is transferred from Camtasia to YouTube, as far as with the 1080, the 720. There's different ways. If you have if you film the quality and it looks good on your phone, you may think it looks good just from what you're viewing it on, but when it's transferred to something like YouTube, it's not really, it was never really recorded in the quality that you're transferring it over to, if that makes sense. So we can talk about those in a later session too. Just because you record something on your phone doesn't mean you need to put it over in 1020. And nowadays, maybe Joan would agree with this too, there's no reason for you to put out a 4K video ever, because people are not viewing that on their, you may hear that that's the best quality. There's no reason to try to push your video to that type of quality into YouTube or something, because that's not what people are viewing it in.
I think we have only shot, and I've shot 4K on my phone. If you want to fill up your phone pretty quickly, that's a good way to do it. But it was because we weren't sure how close we were going to be able to get to something, and we might need to blow it up, because that's something that, you know, I mean, zoom in. But for the most part, no, I wouldn't shoot anything 4K, and I wouldn't worry about putting anything out 4K. There aren't a lot of things that can read that right now anyway. So just shooting in high def, the 1080 is good enough. And I would wonder about the Abby's comment that there's something in the export from Camtasia that there's some settings like that may need to be adjusted and looked at.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it looked good in Camtasia too, I would wonder if it's more about the exporting from Camtasia.
Yeah, I agree. And there's one last question here from Dana. She said she might have missed it, but where the EEO statement should be included.
It would be at the end. And if you use the animated closings that we've provided, it's already on the screen. But if you're not and you're doing something different, then I would just put it at the end of your video.
All right. Well, unless there's any other questions, we'll give you back almost about 5 minutes here of your day to get ready for your next Zoom meeting or whatever. So thank you everybody for joining this. And again, this will be posted on the video production page on the hub, and we'll have 2 more sessions as well. And we look forward to seeing you in those. So thank you, Joan. Thank you, Lily, and thank you everybody else there.